How the heck do these all play music? NPR's Tiny Desk concerts have been a staple of music culture for well over 15 years. It's an intimate setting that shows an artist's skill when reduced to the bare necessities, and sometimes it can even reveal a whole new side of them. So let's dive in to learn how and why it's been successful. The story Big Tiny Desk doesn't want you to know. Everyone can agree that Tiny Desk concerts are great, but everyone can also agree that they sound great. I wonder who did that.
I'm Josh Rogosin. I am, an audio enthusiast, producer, capturing music from all over the world to tell people's stories through sound.
The story of the Tiny Desk started out in Austin, Texas in 2008. Bob Boilen and Stephen Thompson were seeing Laura Gibson perform at South by Southwest, but people in the venue were cheering for March Madness. And Bob and Stephen were annoyed by how loud everything was. After the show, Bob and Stephen met up with Laura and told her that they couldn't really hear what she was playing. Stephen even joked about Laura playing a show at Bob's desk so they could hear it properly. Great joke, right? The kind of joke that stays funny after the 1,244th time you tell it. Josh's story, however, started way earlier than 2008.
I started at NPR in 1999. They did have a pamphlet with some job listings, one of which was broadcast recording technician. There were actually some opportunities to travel the world recording stories for a program called Radio Expeditions. And there was one show to record voodoo rituals and festivals in Togo and Benin, West Africa. Basically an ambisonic rig with 4 omnidirectional microphones connected with tent poles, that you build a tent with. It looked like I had a helicopter, basically.
In 2014, he became the audio engineer for the Tiny Desk concerts, as well as one of its producers. So the premise is simple. Take an artist, put him behind Bob Boilen's old desk, have him play. And that simplicity is a core part of why the series has done so well. But there's a whole lot of intentional planning that goes into it.
That early time learning all these different sound gathering techniques completely informed how I created the sound design for Tiny Desk. I want it to sound super real, like realistic, but also larger than life. I'm really zoning in on each of the individual instruments and musicians. And if there's a cool little lick a guitarist does, I'll go in and make that poke out of the mix. And I think it tends to make it sound much more dynamic when you're really zoning in on all the individual instruments and letting things kind of pop out. I'm also doing a lot of clip gain automation to mute mics that aren't needed when they're being played, and to create multiple instances of the same mic and EQing them drastically differently, so that I can get something to pop out of the mix. Like I remember the Super Organism Tiny Desk. I just didn't have enough mics to record everything. I also didn't know what was going to happen when. So I just set up a bunch of shotgun mics basically at the perimeter of the desk, and I would use multiple instances of the same mic and EQ them completely differently for the different Foley that they were doing. A woman with her hand in a water bucket and it's fluffing it around, and you hear this whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. You couldn't really hear that at all. So I had to create another instance of the mic that was closest to the water bucket, EQ the snot out of it, crank it 30 dB, and then I could hear the water bucket.
The whole space is set up so that every sound source is treated with care, from the singer to the snare drum. I'm a star. And it's not just about the instruments on stage, or in this case on Office, it's about the people too. For some artists, this is a completely new environment.
There's many instances where you get super famous people. They might not actually know what's going on. They just kind of pop up. There was an instance when Nile Rodgers came with his band, and they're singing "We Are Family," and it's like a huge band with a horn section, full on setup. And then there's a part where the woman sings the verse, and it's just one little voice, and I'm not using a PA, and everyone's on top of each other. So I need to direct the band and say, all right, listen folks, it sounds incredible. When you get to the part, the whole band just has to go chunk, literally almost like they're self-mixing themselves. There was another time when David Crosby came and he demanded in-ear monitors. And I had to learn how to handle that. And I said, Mr. Crosby, I just want to let you know we're so excited you're here. We're going to give you whatever you want, but can you just do me the favor of trying the first song as we rehearsed it? He said, okay, fine. He sings the first song, there's uproarious applause, and then of course we go on. So it ended up working out just fine, but you really need to learn how to handle a situation. You also don't want to be a buzzkill.
Plenty of artists have stopped by the desk. Even early on, they had Adele, Wilco, The National, the 1975, but at some point in time, the tiny desk became something bigger. Maybe even regular-sized. The shift really happened in the late 2010s, and while there are plenty of great tiny desk concerts throughout its history, I often find that people cite 3 as the best of the best, or the most important. First is Mac Miller. This was right after the release of Swimming, and sadly a month before his passing. It would end up being one of his last performances. And rewatching it now is a melancholic trip, the knowledge of his passing mixed with a great show on its own merits. You look at the comments, and people don't treat this just as a performance, but as a reminder of an old friend.
A life ain't a life till you live it. I was digging me a hole, big enough to bury my soul. Weight of the world, I gotta carry my own.
He even got Thundercat out to play What's the Use.
I don't understand why you're doing the most. You can love it, you can leave it.
See, like that right there, Mac doing his head shake when Thundercat does his solo, that's what people come to the Tiny Desk for. Second is Anderson .Paak's first concert.
I remember mixing the first Anderson .Paak Tiny Desk thinking, I can't get his vocal above the kit. There's no way that people are going to accept this as a good recording. I was super nervous and I was just trying all these different techniques. Finally, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to have to live with how it sounds. I like the way it sounds. The energy is there. It's an amazing performance. And it was the #1 Tiny Desk concert for many, 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 many years.
You might never come down. It took too long to get this high look down. Say.
And it was pressed on vinyl. I put it out on my Instagram feed, and tagged Anderson .Paak. If anybody knows where I can get a hold of a copy of the record that I recorded 8 years ago with Anderson .Paak, let me know. And Anderson actually responded, and he said, snooze you lose, Jack.
Third is T-Pain, and there's more here than just a good performance. You see, T-Pain got famous in the 2000s for his use of ancient alien technology called auto-tune. He had a bunch of hits, and he was on a bunch of other people's hits, but he and his use of auto-tune were also cited as the death of music. But T-Pain doing the Tiny Desk without his signature auto-tune showed us all something.
Every time somebody going, I'm like, yeah. Hit the float in.
Dude's got pipes! He is such a good singer. This was not only a great time, but proof that this guy was a tremendous musician in his own right, and his auto-tune was just a tool to get a specific sound. Like I said before though, those 3 are just a drop in the ocean when it comes to the 1,000+ Tiny Desk concerts. Essentially every living artist has done one. It's become a way for an artist to demonstrate their talent in an organic environment, and it's huge on YouTube and social media because of it. And that's an interesting juxtaposition, right? The Tiny Desk prides itself on a closeness to the artist and the music, and yet, aside from the people who are there physically when it's recorded, everybody's going to be watching it on their phones or their laptops. How do these performances manage to come off as authentic even when most of the people watching aren't there? Perhaps it's because the Tiny Desk concert is, like everything else NPR produces, a form of journalism.
I'm not really interested in creating the final version of anything. I'm much more interested in capturing a moment in time. And I think that's what translates to the success of Tiny Desk and the style of recordings that I'm making. There's something really compelling because it's so honest.
Hearing that from Josh really changed my perspective of what the Tiny Desk concert is. Sure, it's a performance, but it's also a snapshot in time of an artist, what their sound was, and who they were as creatives. You could say that of any recorded performance, but the way this specific series demonstrates that, how Josh and the rest of the NPR team deliver that to us, is crucial. And in fact, NPR is not the only place you can go to get what the Tiny Desk offers. Now that he's freelance, Josh is doing his own version of it too.
I'm traveling the world telling stories about people and where they're from through their music. So Global Sound Concerts, one of the sessions that comes to mind, I traveled to Mexico City. I found a stunning location called the Parque de Coatzacoalcos, and a section of Mexico City invited this incredible musician, Andre Beltran, and his colleague and friend, Mulu. We recorded this beautiful 3-song set in this incredibly stunning environment. And, we got to hear from Andre about growing up in Mexico City and why being from that place inspires him to be a musician. I'm also working on a series called Ghostlight Concerts, where it's much more about the venues all over the world that you might never get to hear. I was in Brisbane, Australia, and that's basically using an ambisonic mic to record the acoustics of a hall to hear what it sounds like with a couple of musicians in it. So I'm super excited to pursue both of these projects, learning about places and the world and people's stories, which is what I always strive to do at Tiny Desk. I think there's something super refreshing about the kinds of recordings that I'm making for Tiny Desk and now for Global Sound Concerts and for Ghostlight Concerts, that, it's not about capturing something that's perfect. It's about sharing a moment in time to celebrate our collective human experience.
But I want to hear from you now. What do you think of the Tiny Desk concert? Are you a fan? Do you have a favorite one? Let me know in the comments. It's really a wonderful series, not just for the musicians who play on it, but for the phenomenal engineering work. These are excellent mixes that are made even more enjoyable when you have the right gear, which brings me to this video's sponsor, Mackie, the Miggity Mac Daddy. Mackie is known for their high-quality speakers that provide professional-level sound for any purpose. I've used them in the past, and I've been a fan of their quality for a while now. I like to envision myself driving a Mack truck when I use them, but you can imagine any scenario you want. They just released the new CR3.5s, which are designed to be your everyday speakers, perfect for casual listening, music production, or hearing Tiny Desk concerts through these speakers really brings out all the intricate nuances of their mixes, which makes me appreciate them even more. Though if you want to tweak the sound to have more bass or more high-end sparkle, the tone switch makes that super easy. They're also very accommodating to your space thanks to the location switch that lets you switch between bookshelf and desktop positions. You don't even need to worry about cables. The CR3.5s can connect via Bluetooth. Click the link in the description to learn more about the CR3.5 speakers. Thanks to Mackie for sponsoring this video. I'll see you next time.